The ice in my glass has long since melted, leaving behind a watery amber that reflects the dim overhead lights of Murphy's bar. I've been nursing this whiskey for the better part of an hour, watching condensation rings form and disappear on the scarred wooden table. The booth I'm sitting in has become my observatory, my safe harbor in the familiar ritual that Rowan and I have perfected over the years. Across the room, he's working his magic again. Rowan Pierce has this way of leaning against the bar that makes it look effortless, like gravity itself bends to accommodate him. His laugh carries over the low murmur of conversation and the soft jazz trickling from speakers mounted in corners I can't see. The woman he's talking to, blonde, maybe late 20s, wearing a dress that suggests she came here with intention, tilts her head and smiles in that particular way that means he's already won half the battle. I know this dance by heart. I've watched it unfold dozens of times in dozens of bars just like this one. Rowan will say something self-deprecating that somehow manages to highlight his best qualities. She'll laugh, maybe touch his arm. He'll buy her a drink, ask about her work, her hobbies, her dreams. He's genuinely interested, which is part of what makes him so magnetic. Rowan Pierce doesn't perform charm. He simply is charming, the way some people are tall or have brown eyes. Murphy's is the kind of place that feels unchanged since the 70s. All dark wood and brass fixtures, with red vinyl seating that's been patched more times than anyone cares to count. The air carries the permanent scent of beer and old leather, mixed with something warmer, maybe the ghost of 1,000 conversations that happened here before us. It's not trendy, which is exactly why we like it. No one comes here to be seen. They come here to disappear for a while, to let the amber lighting and steady hum of other people's lives wash over them. I take another sip of my drink and feel the burn trail down my throat. From my corner booth, I have a perfect view of the entire bar, but my attention never strays far from Rowan. It's not conscious anymore, this gravitational pull. After 11 years of friendship, watching him has become as natural as breathing. I know the way he runs his hand through his dark hair when he's thinking. I know how his shoulders relax when he laughs, really laughs, not the polite chuckle he gives to fill awkward silences. I know the exact angle his head tilts when he's listening to someone he finds interesting. The woman at the bar is definitely interesting to him. I can tell by the way he's positioned himself, one elbow on the bar, his body angled toward her but not crowding. Rowan has this uncanny ability to make people feel like they're the only person in the room without making them feel trapped. It's a gift, really. One I've never possessed. This is my role in our friendship. The wingman. The reliable constant who sits in the corner booth, occasionally making eye contact across the room to give him a subtle nod or shake of the head if he needs a read on how things are going. I'm the safety net, the excuse to gracefully exit if the conversation turns sour, the backup plan that never gets called into action because Rowan rarely needs one. I used to tell myself I enjoyed it. There was something oddly satisfying about being the architect of his success from a distance, like a director watching his vision come to life on stage. I would study the women he talked to, learn their tells, their interests, their vulnerabilities, and later I would relay my observations to him if he asked. Most of the time he didn't need my help, but having me there seemed to give him confidence, a sense of security that someone was watching his back. Tonight feels different, though. The blonde woman keeps glancing toward our booth, not at me specifically, but in this direction, as if she's trying to solve a puzzle. Maybe she's wondering who the solitary man in the corner is, why he's been sitting alone for so long, why he seems content to watch rather than participate. Or maybe she's picked up on something I've been trying to hide for years, the way my attention never fully leaves Rowan, even when I'm pretending to read the sports scores on the television mounted above the bar. The truth is, I stopped enjoying this ritual a long time ago. Somewhere between college and now, between the night we first stumbled into Murphy's as 20-somethings testing our fake IDs and tonight, sitting here at 32 with the weight of unspoken feelings pressing against my chest like a physical thing. I've become complicit in my own quiet heartbreak, the willing architect of moments that bring me closer to Rowan while simultaneously highlighting the distance between us. He throws his head back and laughs at something she said, and the sound cuts through me the way it always does. Rowan's laugh is infectious, genuine, the kind that makes strangers turn their heads and smile even when they didn't hear the joke. I've heard it thousands of times, but it still has the power to make my chest tighten with something I've never been brave enough to name out loud. The woman touches his arm, fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. This is usually when I look away, when I find something fascinating about the grain in the wooden table or the way the light catches the bottles behind the bar. But tonight I keep watching, cataloging this moment like all the others, storing it away in the mental filing cabinet where I keep everything I'm not allowed to want. Rowan glances in my direction, and for a split second our eyes meet across the dimly lit room. He raises his eyebrows slightly, a silent question I've learned to interpret over the years. Everything good? Still watching my back? Still playing the role we've never officially assigned, but somehow both accepted? I lift my glass in a small salute, the ice cubes clinking softly against the sides. The gesture says what it always says. I'm here. I'm watching. I'm your wingman, your backup, your constant. The reliable Julian Hale who will sit in this booth for as long as it takes, who will drive you home if you drink too much, who will listen to you dissect every conversation tomorrow morning over coffee and pretend my heart doesn't crack a little bit more each time. But something shifts in his expression when our eyes meet tonight. Instead of the grateful nod I'm expecting, instead of turning back to the woman who's clearly interested in going home with him, Rowan holds my gaze for a beat longer than usual. There's something searching in his dark eyes, something I can't quite read from this distance. The moment stretches between us like a held breath, and I feel my pulse quicken in a way that has nothing to do with the whiskey. Then the woman says something that draws his attention back to her, and the spell breaks. But the feeling lingers, that sense that something fundamental just shifted between us, like a tectonic plate moving deep beneath the surface where no one can see. I drain the rest of my drink and signal the waitress for another, settling deeper into the worn vinyl of the booth. Whatever just happened, whatever I thought I saw in Rowan's eyes, it doesn't change anything. Tomorrow we'll wake up and nothing will be different. He'll probably have the blonde woman's number. Maybe they'll go on a date. Maybe it will turn into something. Maybe it won't. And I'll be here, in my corner booth or its equivalent, watching from a safe distance, playing the role I've perfected over the years. The wingman. Always the wingman. Never the one being pursued. The blonde woman leaves 20 minutes later, slipping her phone number into Rowan's palm with a smile that promises future possibilities. I watch her gather her purse and coat, see the way she touches his shoulder one last time before disappearing into the night beyond Murphy's heavy wooden door. The ritual is complete, successful by any measure, yet Rowan doesn't look satisfied as he makes his way back to our booth. He slides across from me with a heaviness I don't expect, his usual post-conquest energy notably absent. The overhead light catches the planes of his face as he settles into the worn vinyl, and I notice things I've trained myself not to see. The way his shirt pulls slightly across his shoulders, the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, the tired quality in his dark eyes that speaks to something deeper than the late hour. You're my lucky charm, he says, but there's no triumph in his voice. Best wingman a guy could ask for. He's said these words before, countless times, but tonight they feel different. Heavier. Like he's testing their weight against something else, something unspoken that hovers between us in the dim space of our corner booth. I force a smile and raise my fresh drink in mock salute. Always happy to help, I tell him, though the words taste hollow against my tongue. The ice in my glass catches the light as I set it down, creating small prisms of amber and gold that dance across the scarred wooden table. Rowan doesn't laugh. Instead, he studies me with an intensity that makes my chest tighten. His fingers drum against the table in a rhythm I don't recognize, and there's something restless in the way he holds himself, like he's trying to solve a problem that doesn't have an obvious solution. This is when he usually tells me about the conversation, about what made her laugh, about whether he thinks she'll actually call. This is when we dissect the evening's performance like coaches reviewing game footage, analyzing what worked and what didn't, planning strategies for the next encounter. But tonight he just sits there, looking at me like he's seeing something he's never noticed before. The silence stretches between us, filled with the ambient noise of Murphy's, conversations from other tables, the soft clink of glasses, the jazz saxophone that seems to echo from everywhere and nowhere at once. I take another sip of whiskey and feel the familiar burn, the temporary warmth that never quite reaches the cold places inside me. What if I don't want anyone else? Rowan says suddenly, his voice so quiet I almost miss it over the background noise. The words hit me like ice water. I freeze with my glass halfway to my lips, unsure if I heard him correctly, unsure if this is another one of his philosophical moments or something else entirely. Rowan has always been prone to late-night existential questions, especially after a few drinks. But there's something different in his tone tonight. Something that makes my pulse quicken and my throat go dry. I force a laugh, the sound sharp and artificial in the warm air between us. "What do you mean?" I ask, though part of me doesn't want to know the answer. Part of me wants to deflect this moment, to steer the conversation back to safer territory where I know the rules and my role in them. But Rowan doesn't laugh with me. His eyes stay fixed on mine with a steadiness that makes it impossible to look away. The noise of the bar seems to fade into background static, and suddenly it feels like we're the only two people in the room, suspended in this moment that feels both inevitable and impossible. "You know what I mean," he says, and his voice carries a weight that makes my heart hammer against my ribs. I don't know what to say. After 11 years of friendship, after countless nights exactly like this one, after perfecting the art of being what he needs me to be without asking for anything in return, I find myself completely speechless. The carefully constructed walls I've built around my feelings feel suddenly fragile, like they might crumble if I breathe too hard. Rowan reaches across the table, and his fingers brush mine where they rest against my glass. The touch is brief, barely there, but it sends electricity up my arm and straight to my chest. For a moment, I think about pulling away, about making a joke, about doing anything to restore the safe distance that's defined our relationship for so long. Instead, I sit perfectly still, afraid that any movement might shatter whatever this moment is, whatever possibility is hanging in the air between us like morning mist that could disappear with the slightest disturbance. The bartender calls last call from across the room, and the spell breaks. Rowan pulls his hand back, and the moment dissolves, leaving behind only the memory of his fingers against mine and the echo of words that might change everything or might mean nothing at all. "We should probably head out," I say, my voice rougher than I intend. The practical words feel like a betrayal, but I don't know how else to navigate this sudden shift in the landscape of our friendship. Rowan nods and slides out of the booth, but his eyes never leave mine. As we gather our coats and make our way toward the door, I can feel the weight of his question following us into the night, settling into the space between what we've always been and what we might become if either of us is brave enough to find out. 3 weeks pass before I hear from him again. 3 weeks of checking my phone more often than I care to admit, of replaying that moment in Murphy's until I've worn it smooth like a stone turned over and over in restless hands. I convince myself I imagine the weight in his voice, the electricity when his fingers brushed mine. Rowan Pierce has always been tactile, affectionate in the way some people are naturally warm. I've probably been reading meaning into nothing, projecting 11 years of carefully buried feelings onto a moment that was simply him being himself. When he finally calls, it's a Thursday evening in early November. I'm sitting in my apartment, laptop open on the coffee table, working on a logo design for a client who can't seem to decide what they want. The sound of his voice through the phone speaker makes something loosen in my chest that I didn't realize had been wound tight. He cancels his date. Just like that, halfway through getting ready, he calls the woman, Sarah, I think her name was, and tells her something came up. Then he's at my door 20 minutes later with a six-pack of beer and that particular restless energy that means he needs to talk, but doesn't know how to start. "I'm tired of pretending to be interested in strangers," he says as he settles into the corner of my couch, beer already half finished. The television is on, but neither of us is really watching it. Some documentary about ocean life that provides a gentle blue glow and the soothing voice of a narrator describing the mating habits of deep-sea creatures. The irony isn't lost on me. Rowan tips his head back against the cushions and closes his eyes. In the shifting light from the screen, he looks younger somehow, more vulnerable than the confident man who charmed the blonde woman at Murphy's. There are lines around his eyes that weren't there in college, a weight to his shoulders that speaks to the accumulation of years and experiences and relationships that started with promise and ended with polite text messages. "You know," he says without opening his eyes, "you're the one who's always there." The words hang in the air between us, simple and complicated all at once. What if I don't want anyone else? It's not a question this time. It's a statement, delivered with the quiet certainty of someone who's been thinking about it for weeks, turning it over in his mind until the edges are smooth and the meaning is clear. My heart starts beating so hard I'm sure he can hear it over the documentary narrator's description of bioluminescent jellyfish. I take a long pull from my beer, buying time, trying to organize thoughts that feel suddenly scattered like leaves in a strong wind. The safe thing would be to laugh it off again, to deflect with humor or change the subject or suggest we talk about something else. The safe thing would be to preserve the friendship, to protect the dynamic that's worked for 11 years, even if it's slowly been killing me from the inside. But when I look at him, really look at him, I see something in his expression that stops the deflection before it can form on my tongue. His eyes are open now, dark and serious, fixed on my face with an intensity that makes it impossible to pretend I don't understand what he's saying. Rowan, I start, but he shakes his head and shifts on the couch, so he's facing me fully. I know how this sounds, he says. I know we've been friends forever, and I know this could mess everything up. But I can't keep going out there, meeting people who don't matter, pretending I'm looking for something when what I want is sitting right here. The words hit me like a physical force. After years of imagining this conversation, of playing out scenarios in my head that always ended with rejection or awkward laughter or the slow death of our friendship, I'm completely unprepared for the reality of it. For the way his voice cracks slightly on the word want, for the vulnerability in his eyes, for the way my entire world seems to tilt on its axis and resettle into a completely new configuration. The beer bottle feels slippery in my suddenly sweaty palms. I set it down on the coffee table with more care than necessary, using the movement to break eye contact, to give myself a moment to breathe. When I look back at him, he's still watching me with that patient intensity, waiting for me to catch up to where he's already arrived. I don't know what to say, I tell him, and it's the truth. Every response I've ever imagined feels inadequate now, too small to contain the magnitude of what's happening between us. You don't have to say anything, Rowan replies. Just don't run away from this. Don't pretend you don't feel it too. The documentary continues in the background, something about the vast, unexplored depths of the ocean, about creatures that have adapted to live in darkness and pressure that would crush anything else. I think about adaptation, about the slow evolution of feelings that started as friendship and became something else so gradually I didn't notice until it was too late to stop it. The air between us feels charged, electric with possibility and terror in equal measure. This is the moment I've been both dreading and hoping for. The moment that will either destroy everything we've built or transform it into something I've only allowed myself to imagine in the darkest, most honest hours of sleepless nights. Rowan reaches across the small space between us and covers my hand with his. His palm is warm, slightly rough from the carpentry work he does on weekends, familiar and foreign all at once. The touch sends electricity up my arm. The same sensation from Murphy's, but stronger now, more intentional. So, he says quietly, his thumb tracing across my knuckles, are we going to keep pretending? Everything changes after that night on my couch, but so gradually that at first I convince myself nothing has changed at all. We don't talk about what Rowan said, don't dissect the weight of his hand covering mine or the way the air between us seemed to shimmer with unspoken possibilities. Instead, we fall into a new rhythm that feels both natural and terrifying, like walking a tightrope that I'm not sure either of us knows how to navigate. The phone calls come more frequently now. Tuesday evenings when he's supposed to be on a date with the marketing executive he met at a coffee shop. Thursday nights when he was planning to meet the grad student from his gym. Each time, the excuse is different, but the result is the same. He ends up at my apartment with takeout or beer or sometimes just the restless energy that means he needs to be somewhere familiar, somewhere safe. I tell myself I should ask him about it, should point out the pattern that's emerging, but I'm afraid of the answer. Afraid he'll realize what he's doing and course-correct back to the version of himself that chased strangers in dimly lit bars while I watched from the sidelines. So instead I let it happen, let him settle into my space like he belongs there. Let myself pretend that this is normal, that friends spend this much time together, that the way he looks at me sometimes doesn't mean what I think it might mean. The touches start small. A hand on my back when he passes behind me in the kitchen, knees brushing when we sit on the couch, close enough that I can smell his cologne mixed with something that's just him. Rowan has always been tactile, but there's something different now, something deliberate in the way his fingers linger when he hands me a beer, in the way he lets his arm rest along the back of the couch, so his fingertips graze my shoulder. I find myself cataloging these moments like a scientist gathering data, trying to determine if I'm imagining the shift or if something fundamental really has changed between us. The problem is that I want it to mean something so desperately that I can't trust my own perception. Every touch could be friendship. Every lingering look could be my imagination filling in gaps that don't actually exist. The worst part is how disoriented I feel, like the ground beneath our friendship has become unstable in a way that thrills and terrifies me in equal measure. For 11 years, I've known exactly where I stood with Rowan Pierce. I was the constant, the reliable one, the friend who would always be there, but never be more than that. It was a painful certainty, but it was certainty nonetheless. Now I exist in a space between what we were and what we might be, and I don't know the rules anymore. 3 weeks into this new dynamic, we end up at Murphy's again. Not for the old ritual. Rowan hasn't mentioned wanting to meet anyone, hasn't scanned the room for possibilities since we walked in. Instead, we sit at the bar itself this time, shoulder to shoulder on worn leather stools, talking about work and weekend plans and everything except the tension that seems to follow us everywhere now. The bartender recognizes us, makes small talk about the weather and the local baseball team's disappointing season. Rowan orders another round, and when he turns to ask if I want the same, our faces are suddenly much closer than they need to be. Close enough that I can see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from his skin. For a moment, neither of us moves. The noise of the bar fades into background static, and it feels like we're suspended in amber, frozen in this moment of possibility that could shatter if either of us breathes too hard. Then Rowan does something that stops my heart entirely. He leans closer instead of pulling away, close enough that I can feel his breath against my cheek when he speaks. "I'm already with who I want to be with," he says, so quietly that only I can hear him over the ambient noise of conversation and clinking glasses. The words hit me like electricity. My pulse jumps and my hands go shaky, and suddenly I understand with perfect clarity that this isn't my imagination, isn't wishful thinking or projection, or any of the other explanations I've been using to protect myself from hope. This is real. Whatever this is between us, whatever it's becoming, it's real. But reality is more complicated than hope. Reality means consequences and complications, and the very real possibility that we could destroy 11 years of friendship chasing something that might not survive the transition from fantasy to fact. Reality means that I have to make a choice, have to decide if I'm brave enough to step off the tightrope into unknown territory. I turn to look at him and find him already watching me, waiting for some kind of response to words that feel like they've changed everything and nothing all at once. The space between us crackles with tension, with years of unspoken feelings suddenly given voice, with the weight of a moment that feels too big for this dimly lit bar, with its scarred wooden surfaces and jazz saxophone bleeding from hidden speakers. "I'm already with who I want to be with too," I tell him, and the admission feels like jumping off a cliff, like free fall with no guarantee of a safe landing. Rowan's smile is soft and relieved and beautiful in the amber light, and when he reaches for my hand this time, I don't hesitate to let him take it. We walk back to my apartment in silence, our hands linked between us like a bridge spanning years of careful distance. The November air is sharp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter, but I barely notice the cold. Every nerve ending feels alive, hyper-aware of the warmth of Rowan's palm against mine, of the way our steps have naturally synchronized after all these years of walking side by side. My apartment feels different when we step inside, charged with possibility in a way that makes even familiar objects seem foreign. The couch where we've spent countless evenings suddenly looks smaller, more intimate. The lamp in the corner casts shadows that seem deeper, more significant. Everything is exactly as we left it hours ago, but the context has shifted so fundamentally that it might as well be a completely different space. Rowan releases my hand to hang up his coat, and the absence of his touch feels like a small loss. I busy myself with unnecessary tasks, adjusting the thermostat, checking that the door is properly locked, anything to give my nervous energy somewhere to go. When I turn around, he's standing in the middle of my living room looking lost, like he's not sure what comes next either. We need to talk, I say, though part of me wants to skip over the talking entirely, wants to close the distance between us and let touch communicate what words might complicate. But 11 years of friendship deserves more than impulsive action, deserves the honesty that we've been dancing around for weeks. Rowan nods and settles onto the couch, but not in his usual corner. Instead, he sits in the middle, leaving space for me beside him while making it clear that distance isn't what he wants anymore. When I join him, the cushions dip and shift so that we're naturally drawn closer together, our knees touching, our bodies angled toward each other in a way that feels both new and inevitable. I've been feeling lost, he says without preamble, his voice rougher than usual. All this dating, all these strangers who don't know me, who don't get my jokes or understand why I collect vintage vinyl or remember that I hate mushrooms on pizza. It always felt empty, like I was going through the motions of what I thought I was supposed to want instead of what I actually wanted. He pauses, runs his hand through his dark hair in that gesture I've watched 1,000 times, but never allowed myself to find endearing. When he looks at me again, there's something raw in his expression, something vulnerable that makes my chest tight with tenderness and terror in equal measure. You were always the constant that felt like home, he continues. You were the one who knew me, really knew me, and I kept trying to find that feeling with other people when it was already right here. I just didn't let myself see it because I was scared of ruining what we had. The words wash over me like a tide, carrying away years of careful pretense and leaving me exposed on unfamiliar shore. I've imagined this conversation so many times, but the reality is more overwhelming than any fantasy, more real and frightening and beautiful than anything my imagination could construct. I need to tell you something, I say, my voice barely above a whisper. I've had feelings for you for years. Since college, maybe earlier. I never said anything because I didn't think it was mutual, because I was terrified of losing you entirely if I pushed for something you didn't want. The confession hangs between us like a held breath. Rowan's eyes widen slightly, and I see surprise there, but not the kind of shock that suggests he never considered the possibility. More like the recognition of something he suspected but never let himself fully believe. Years, he repeats, and there's something almost awed in his voice. All this time, we've been dancing around each other, both too scared to be honest about what we wanted. The weight of unspoken years crashes between us like a wave breaking against rocks. All those nights at Murphy's, all those times I watched him charm strangers while I sat in the corner booth nursing drinks and heartbreak. All those moments when he looked at me with something that might have been longing if I'd been brave enough to interpret it that way. All those almosts and what-ifs and carefully buried hopes suddenly given form and weight and meaning. Rowan reaches up and cups my face with both hands, his thumbs tracing along my cheekbones with a tenderness that makes my breath catch. His palms are warm and slightly rough, and there's something about the deliberate gentleness of the gesture that unmakes me completely. So are we going to keep pretending? He asks, his voice soft but steady. Or are you going to let me kiss you? It's not really a question. It's an invitation, an offering, a moment of truth that we can't take back once we cross it. I think about all the reasons this could be a mistake, all the ways this could change everything between us, all the potential for heartbreak and loss and the destruction of the most important relationship in my life. Then I think about the alternative, continuing to pretend, continuing to bury feelings that have only grown stronger with time, continuing to be his wingman while my heart slowly breaks watching him search for something he's already found. Yes, I whisper, and the word feels like stepping off a cliff, like free fall towards something that could be beautiful or devastating or both. When Rowan kisses me, it's soft and hesitant at first, like he's still giving me the chance to change my mind. But then I kiss him back and something shifts between us, 11 years of careful restraint giving way to something honest and desperate and long overdue. His hands tangle in my hair, and I can taste the beer we shared at Murphy's, can smell his cologne mixed with something warmer and more intimate. The kiss is everything I imagined and nothing like I expected, tender and fierce and years in the making, a collision of friendship and desire that transforms both into something entirely new. I wake up before dawn with Rowan's arm draped across my chest and panic rising in my throat like bile. The gray light filtering through my bedroom windows illuminates the wreckage of last night. Our clothes scattered across the hardwood floor, the rumpled sheets that smell like him. The way his dark hair falls across the pillow in a way that's both achingly familiar and completely foreign. For a moment, I let myself memorize this scene, store it away like all the other moments I've cataloged over the years. The steady rhythm of his breathing against my neck. The weight of his body pressed along my side. The way his fingers curl loosely against my ribs, even in sleep, like he's afraid I might disappear if he doesn't maintain some point of contact. Then reality crashes over me like ice water. What have we done? 11 years of friendship, 11 years of careful balance and mutual trust, and knowing exactly where we stood with each other. And we've thrown it all away for one night of giving in to feelings that should have stayed buried. I slip out of bed as carefully as possible, trying not to wake him, trying not to think about how natural it felt to fall asleep beside him or how right his body looked in my bed. The bathroom mirror reflects someone I don't recognize. Hair messed from sleep and other activities, lips slightly swollen, a mark on my collarbone that will remind me of this mistake every time I catch a glimpse of it. By the time I've showered and dressed, Rowan is awake, sitting on the edge of my bed with his jeans on, but his shirt still wrinkled on the floor. He looks up when I enter the room, and there's something hopeful in his expression that makes my chest ache with regret and longing in equal measure. "Morning," he says, his voice still rough with sleep, and the simple word carries so much weight that I have to look away. "I can't do this," I tell him, the words tumbling out before I can stop them. "I can't pretend this doesn't change everything. I can't risk losing you completely because we got caught up in a moment and made a mistake." The hope in his eyes dies so quickly it's like watching a candle get snuffed out. He stands slowly, reaching for his shirt, and the careful way he moves tells me he's trying to maintain some dignity in the face of what feels like rejection. "A mistake," he repeats, his voice flat. "That's what last night was to you. A mistake." I want to take the word back as soon as it leaves my mouth. Want to explain that it's not the feelings that are wrong, but the timing, the circumstances, the terrifying possibility that we could destroy something precious in pursuit of something uncertain. But the damage is already done. I can see it in the way his shoulders tense, in the careful distance he puts between us as he pulls his shirt over his head. "Rowan," I start, but he shakes his head and moves toward the door. "It's fine, Julian. I get it. We crossed a line, and now you want to go back to pretending it never happened. Just like we've been pretending about everything else for years." The accusation hits harder than it should because there's truth in it. I have been pretending, have been choosing the safety of distance over the risk of honesty, have been content to love him from the sidelines rather than step into the arena where hearts get broken and friendships get destroyed. "That's not what I want," I say, but the words sound hollow even to me. "Then what do you want?" he asks, turning back to face me with something desperate in his expression. "Because I can't keep doing this dance with you, Julian. I can't keep pretending that I don't want more when I do. I can't go back to being just your friend who you watch from corner booths while I try to find with strangers what I already have with you." The raw honesty in his voice cuts through my panic like a blade. This is Rowan without artifice, without the charm and easy confidence that he wears like armor in the world. This is him vulnerable and real and asking me to be brave enough to meet him in that space. But I'm not brave. I've spent 11 years perfecting the art of emotional cowardice, of wanting things I'm too scared to reach for, of choosing safety over possibility every single time. The idea of risking everything we've built for something that might not work terrifies me more than continuing to live in the space between friendship and something more. "I don't know," I tell him, and the admission feels like failure. "I don't know how to do this without ruining everything we have." Rowan studies my face for a long moment, and I can see him making calculations behind his eyes, weighing his next words against the fragile state of whatever exists between us now. "I don't want to lose my best friend either," he says finally, his voice softer but no less intense. "But I can't keep holding this in, Julian. I can't keep wanting you and pretending I don't. I can't go back to watching you watch me in bars while we both pretend that we're satisfied with what we have when we could have so much more." He takes a step closer, close enough that I can smell his cologne mixed with the scent of my soap from when he used my shower. Close enough that I have to fight the urge to reach for him, to close the distance and let touch communicate what words are failing to convey. So you need to decide, he continues, his dark eyes never leaving mine. You need to choose honesty over fear. Choose me fully instead of from the sidelines. Because I'm done pretending, and I need to know if you're willing to stop pretending too. The ultimatum hangs between us like a bridge I'm too scared to cross. On one side is safety, the familiar territory of friendship and carefully managed distance. On the other is unknown country, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. I look at Rowan, really look at him, and see 11 years of history in his face. All the shared jokes and late-night conversations and moments of quiet understanding that have built the foundation of the most important relationship in my life. But I also see something new, something that started the night he asked what if I don't want anyone else, and has been growing steadily ever since. The choice, when I finally make it, feels less like stepping off a cliff and more like coming home. I choose you, I tell him, and the words feel like stepping out of a shadow I've been hiding in for years. I choose this, whatever this is, whatever it becomes. I choose honesty over fear. The transformation in Rowan's face is immediate and profound, like watching the sun break through storm clouds. The careful distance he's been maintaining dissolves, and suddenly he's close enough to touch. Close enough that I can see the relief and joy and something deeper swimming in his dark eyes. We spend the rest of that morning talking, really talking, for the first time in 11 years. We sit on my couch with coffee growing cold between us and excavate years of buried feelings, missed signals, moments when we almost said something but chose safety instead. The conversation is awkward and necessary and cathartic, full of admissions that feel like small acts of courage and confessions that reshape the entire history of our friendship. Rowan tells me about the night in college when I fell asleep against his shoulder during a movie and he realized he wanted to kiss me, but convinced himself it was just the beer talking. I tell him about the time he brought that redhead to my birthday party 3 years ago, and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom because watching them together felt like swallowing glass. We mapped the geography of our denial, all the ways we taught ourselves not to want what was right in front of us. The next few weeks are a careful excavation of new territory. We take it slowly, both of us acutely aware of how precious and fragile this shift between us is. We go on what we carefully don't call dates. Dinner at restaurants where we've never been. Afternoon hikes where we can hold hands without anyone we know seeing us. Quiet evenings at my apartment where we learn the difference between friendship intimacy and something deeper. Rowan doesn't go to bars looking for strangers anymore. I don't sit in corner booths watching him charm other people. Instead, we create new rituals, new patterns that belong to us as whatever we're becoming rather than whatever we were. We learn to navigate the space between friendship and romance, to honor the 11 years of history that brought us here while building something entirely new on that foundation. The first time he stays over deliberately, not because we got carried away, but because we planned it, because we both want to wake up together. I lie awake for hours just listening to him breathe. There's something miraculous about the ordinary intimacy of it, the way his body relaxes completely in sleep, the way he unconsciously gravitates toward my warmth even when he's not awake to think about it. 6 weeks after that morning in my bedroom, when I almost chose fear over possibility, we find ourselves back at Murphy's. It's a Friday night in December, and the bar is decorated with strings of white lights that cast everything in a warm, golden glow. Snow is falling outside the windows, thick flakes that promise a quiet weekend ahead. We sit at the same corner booth where it all started, but everything is different now. Rowan slides into the seat beside me instead of across from me, close enough that our thighs press together under the table. When he reaches for my hand, I don't hesitate to give it to him. Don't worry about who might see or what they might think. The bartender who's seen us dozens of times over the years approaches our table with a knowing smile. You two are the regulars now, he says, setting down our drinks without being asked. Guess you don't need a wingman anymore, he adds with a wink at Rowan. Rowan laughs, the sound warm and unguarded, and squeezes my hand under the table. Never did, apparently. I was just too stubborn to realize it. I watch him as he talks to the bartender about the weather and weekend plans and the local hockey team's chances this season, and I'm struck by how natural this feels. How right. For years I convinced myself that wanting more would ruin what we had. But the truth is that honesty has only made us closer, has given us permission to be fully ourselves with each other in ways we never were before. When the bartender moves on to other customers, Rowan turns to face me fully, his free hand coming up to trace along my jaw in a gesture that's become familiar over these past weeks. The touch is gentle and possessive at the same time, claiming and tender in equal measure. "No regrets?" he asks, though his voice carries confidence rather than worry. "None," I tell him, and I mean it completely. The fear is still there, probably always will be. The awareness that love is risk, that opening your heart means accepting the possibility of heartbreak. But I've learned that some things are worth the risk, that some people are worth choosing over and over again, even when the future is uncertain. Rowan leans closer and kisses me, soft and unhurried, in the corner booth of Murphy's bar where this all began. When we break apart, he rests his forehead against mine and smiles that particular smile that's just for me now, the one that says he's exactly where he wants to be. Outside, the snow continues to fall, blanketing the city in quiet white. Inside, the bar hums with conversation and laughter and the soft jazz that seems to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. And in our corner booth, two people who spend 11 years being almost everything to each other finally become everything, completely and without reservation, under the warm amber lights that have witnessed so many beginnings and endings and new chapters. The Wingman era is over. Something better has taken its place.